The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Here's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove podcast. We start our college football preview with the Big 12 conference. We'll talk a little bit of other things as well. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove podcast.
From Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network, you're listening to the Sports Stove podcast with your host, Vince Stover.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up in me?
Welcome in to an all-new edition of the Sports Stove podcast presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. Right now, you can go to righteousfelon.com. You can use the promo code BELLYUP at checkout and get 15% off your purchase. It's quite the thing you can do. Make sure you go check out Righteous Felon. Let them know the Sports Stove sent you. You will not regret it. Welcome into this fine Wednesday evening, and we are talking football. It's been a while since we talked football, but we start our college football preview today. I'm Vince Stover, joined by my dad, Dale Stover. Dad, how you doing?
Doing good. Hard to believe we're talking football again, but it won't be long. It'll start moving right along here. NFL camps open up again in a couple weeks, and of course, college football will start up earlier than that, and so we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So basically, we're going to be football heavy from here until January, probably. Tomorrow night, I'll go live at 8 o'clock with a first ever live edition of the Sports Stove Local Hour. And we do our position previews. We got the quarterback coach, Maxwell Smith, the offensive coordinator and running backs coach, Andy Richmond, and New York Jets running back Michael Carter's brother, Joshua Carter, is going to be on the show as well tomorrow, covering EKU quarterbacks and running backs. So if you're interested, tune into that live, or always, of course, catch it afterwards on the podcast version. You mentioned the NFL camp starting up. Of course, the biggest news right now is that Aaron Rodgers can be viewed on Hard Knocks for the first time ever, as the Jets will be the team featured on Hard Knocks this year. I'm sure that will be very entertaining. New York has some drama already, though. Saquon Barkley wanting that extension, hasn't gotten it yet, and now, you know, the old agent coming out and saying, well, he may not play if he doesn't get that extension. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts? We saw Le'Veon Bell. He held out, didn't play for a season, and he really never returned to form. What do you think about Saquon Barkley's situation?
Yeah, I mean, Barkley at his age and stage of a career, if he was to set out a year, that probably would, change things greatly. It'd be harder to come back, you would think. I mean, I don't know the Giants' cap space or whatever, but the way he's been playing, and, they've had a positive year last year, I would think, if they can, they'd want to, get him re-signed and, get him into camp. But I don't know all the particulars of the money or the cap space and, exactly what he's asking, but I'm sure he provides leadership for them. And, I think still have a little question of quarterback, even though they've committed there, but Barkley's a very solid piece for sure. And like you've said, I think they have a good coach. So I think it'd be important to get Barkley in the fold.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what he wants, right? I don't know what he's asking for. I would assume he's asking for something in the $8 to $10 million range per year. How many years does he want? I haven't really read up. I don't really care about the Giants. I haven't read up on this situation a whole lot, but I would think the Giants want to get this handled. I would think they'd want Saquon around for the next 3 or 4 years, but who knows? People get weird about running backs, but I don't think people understand just how good Saquon Barkley is. And I think with the way the Giants are building right now, man, there's potential there for them to be a really good football team this year. If you get rid of Saquon, unless you're replacing him with someone that's not currently on the roster, I'm not sure how comfortable I would feel going into the season with the guys that are there outside of Saquon Barkley as being your main guys at the very least. But NFL football does kick up soon. That'll be fun seeing the battles going on for depth charts and different things like that. But
like you said, Saquon Barkley really is good. People may not remember that. Before the injury, I remember that year in fantasy football, I think he was the consensus number one guy you were going to take. There was no doubt about it. Then, of course, the injuries kind of changed that a little bit. But, he was very, very good.
Yep, he is. Yeah, I agree. But we are going to spend the next several weeks focused on college football. And we're going to preview each conference, the Power 5 conferences at the very least, and go through these. We'll give the win total predictions. We'll tell you whether we think they're going to win more or less than those games. The reality is when we come through these Power 5 conferences, you and we don't spend a lot of time watching a lot of these teams. So I understand some people are going to listen to this, fan bases will listen, and they'll be like, oh, you know nothing about our team. Okay. That's fine. But I didn't have a chance to calculate last year's over and unders and how we did on those. I need to go back and look at those. So maybe next week I'll have some of that information for you. But we'll go through the conference. Today, the Big 12. We'll look at each team, who their head coach is, who the quarterback is, a couple quick thoughts about them, their win totals, whether we think they're going over or under. And then at the end, we are going to put these teams in tiers. And we've done this for the last couple of years. We have 4 tiers. We have a championship contender tier. So that's a team or teams we think can actually contend for the national championship. We have conference contenders. So teams we think can contend to win the conference. That doesn't necessarily make them obviously a national championship team, depending on the conference, of course. Then we've got just a third tier. I call it looking up, teams that aren't horrible. Maybe the future is bright. Maybe they're going to have a down year this year, but they'll bounce back. And then we have a 4th tier that we call the Vanderbilt tier. And this is the team that you have zero hope for having any success in the near future. And so we'll put each of the teams in tiers tonight. We'll talk about a couple of those tiers. So let's get started. We're going to go through alphabetically this year, each team. And so we're going to start with Baylor Bears. They are coached by Dave Aranda. Again, quarterback Blake Sharpen is currently listed as the starting quarterback. And I know if you're tight with Baylor, maybe you have more information than I do on this. But he is the guy that is currently listed as of last night as the quarterback. They do have a good running back returning this year. But there's always questions in recent years with Baylor. There was years where we thought, man, their offense is explosive. But right now, Baylor is kind of that middle of the pack Big 12 team. At least that's what it looks like. Their win total is set at 6.5. Dad, you look at Baylor. What do you think about them going into this year, and what's your thoughts on their win total?
Well, I again, like you said, I think they're kind of a middle of the pack. There's kind of a lot of teams in this conference that are in that spot. Here. And of course, college football is going to change a little bit this year. We've talked about that with the transfer portal. So it's going to be hard to know until some of these teams start playing. Some of these players that came in may make a huge difference, that we're not expecting. But with Baylor, 6.5, I think I would go over 6.5. I think they'll do better than that, better than just qualify for a bowl. And, doing a lot better than that would be a surprise, I think, for them. But I think they can get 7 or 8 wins.
Yeah, when I look at teams that have questions at quarterback, when they don't know who their guy is back in the summer, back in even the spring, I always question how successful they're going to be. That doesn't mean they don't have a guy. It doesn't mean that Blake Shapen can come in and play well and be the guy. But I always am concerned about that. You bring up the transfer portal. Obviously, that's not new. That's been a couple years in the making. To this point, Baylor hasn't been able to be as successful with the portal as some other teams have. I'm going to go under 6.5 this year on Baylor. I wouldn't be shocked if they got the 7 or even 8, but I think 6 or 5 kind of looks at where they're heading right now, maybe even putting their coach on the hot seat a little bit coming into this year. And I don't know, did you have down big games that they got going on this year?
Well, as far as a big game is concerned, The big game on their schedule will be Texas, I think, in week 4. And, this conference is going to be very interesting because with the Texas-Oklahoma thing, because, of course, this will be the last year with Texas and Oklahoma there. So, Texas and or Oklahoma would love to win the conference, but are they going to be more motivated? Every other team, this is going to be their last shot at Texas and Oklahoma. And of course, the 4 new teams will be their only shot at them. So I really think Texas and Oklahoma are going to get everybody's best game just because of the way it is. So I think either they'll show they are dominant, they're a step above, or otherwise it could be an interesting year because I think everybody's going to shoot for them. But I think when you look at Baylor in the middle of the pack, it's the 4th game of the year. If they were to beat Texas, that would really be off to a big start. If not, then they're probably, where we thought they would be in the middle of the pack, since that game is fairly early.
To me, the intrigue of this conference is the new teams, more so than the teams leaving. You got teams that, coming in, there's very low expectations for the new teams. I don't think the highest win total from any of the new teams, I think, is 5.5, maybe 6. But it's not high. UCF is 7, but I don't know. I think the surprise will be is if one of these teams that's not expected to win a whole bunch all of a sudden shows up in this new conference and does damage. We'll see how it shakes out. I think, we'll get to this later. So Baylor, you go over, I go under 6.5. I don't think they're going to look good this year. And like I said, I think they might be putting the coach on the hot seat as well. Next up is BYU head coach Kalani Sitake. Quarterback Caden Slovis feels like he's been everywhere. Feels like he's been in college for 8 seasons. Now he goes to BYU. I don't think you can expect much from the defense here at BYU. There's not a strength there on the defense. And as a matter of fact, you think historically Big 12 has no defense. BYU might fit that. So I'm not looking too big on BYU in their first year here and the issues I think they can have. Their win total is 5.5. Dad, I know that you were around in the glory days of BYU. In my lifetime, they really haven't been that great. They've had good years, but not great. What do you think about BYU, how they currently sit in the Big 12?
Yeah, well, I think they're going to have a tough time their first year in here. So 5.5. Actually, I think I'll go under 5.5 on that one. They're, the last couple of years, sometimes they have surprise teams, but I don't know that they have the talent to do that. And you have a lot of other teams in the conference that are right there in the middle, which I think are maybe just a game or two above where they're at. So I'm not expecting BYU to surprise anybody a whole lot in the conference, and I would go under 5.5.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm under as well. Caden Slovis is a great pickup. A lot of potential there, but like I said, I just don't think they're a deep enough team, a full enough team in year one to make much of an impact. Let's move on to Cincinnati. Scott Satterfield comes over, former Louisville coach. They also bring over quarterback and Emory Jones, former Florida Gator, comes in to run things. Now, this Cincinnati team, they've got questions on the offensive side of the ball, but their defense has a chance to keep them in games this year. I think Cincinnati's the most intriguing new team, although I think we'll get to it, but I think Central Florida is actually the team I expect to have the best of the newcomers. But I think Cincinnati's a really intriguing team. I don't like Scott Satterfield, and with not having a great offense, although Emory Jones might show up, I'm not sure how well they can do in year one in the conference, but their win total is at 5.5. You live, closer to Cincinnati. Well, actually, we live about the same distance as Cincinnati, but you live in Ohio near Cincinnati as well. Is there hype about what's going on in Cincinnati, or are you hearing anything?
Yeah, people have been very excited the last couple of years, with Cincinnati. Of course, they lost their coach. That was a big thing there. There's definitely an upbeat here in Ohio as far as Cincinnati, but I think the first year in the conference, if I remember looking at their schedule right, they've got one of the harder schedules.
Yes.
So I don't think that's going to help them unless they're going to have to upset at least 2 teams I think, to have a really big season. Again, Cincinnati, has done well in the last few years under Fickle, and they may still be able to recruit or whatever, but I'll go over 5.5. But I don't know that it'll be much over that. They could get to 6 games, get in a bowl, and that would be good for them in the first year in the conference. There is a lot of excitement about being in the Big 12 and moving up a little bit. And I think eventually they will be a power and a good addition to the conference. But this year could be kind of a tough year because of the schedule, but I'll go over 5.5.
I'm going to go under. This is one where again, 6 or 7 wins, I think, is definitely doable for Cincinnati. I don't know that Emory Jones is the guy. I really don't like Scott Satterfield. So that's probably where it hurts me the most. So I'm going to go under 5.5. I think it's 5 wins there. I just think the newcomers are going to have a pretty tough year in the Big 12. Speaking of, let's go now to Houston. Dana Holgorsen, the head coach. They've got a Texas Tech transfer at quarterback, Donovan Smith. This offense should be pretty good. The defense is the question mark in Houston. Again, you talk about Big 12. Historically, you question defenses anyhow, although I think in recent years it hasn't been as bad as we remember. But that being said, Holgorsen brings in this Houston team. By the way, if you want Houston Cougar information, you need to go check out the Locked On Cougars podcast with our buddy Parker Ainsworth. He was just at Media Day today. He should have lots of information coming out tomorrow. So if you care about Houston, go check out Locked On Cougars and check out Parker Ainsworth on the Belly Up Sports Network as well. Houston is at win totals at 5 for the newcomers. How are you feeling about Houston?
Again, I think, like you said, the newcomers as a whole are going to have a tough time, and I think Houston will, again, with their schedule. So I'll go under 5 wins. You would like to think they could win 5, but I think there are just so many teams that are right there, middle of the pack that are just, again, a little bit above them. So I don't think Houston will do well. I think they'll be one of the couple bottom teams in the conference.
I got over on Houston. I like Donovan Smith at quarterback. I like Holgorsen at coach. I think their defense, although it's not good, it's better than BYU's defense. I think of the 4 teams we've discussed, Baylor, BYU, Cincinnati, and now Houston, I like the situation with Donovan Smith as good as anything. Caden Slovis is good, but I really think Houston could surprise some people. I don't think 7 wins is out of the question. I'm going over 5 for Houston, and I think they'll be a little bit of a darling team, maybe early in the year as well there in the Big 12. Let's go to Iowa State. Head coach Matt Campbell, man, his name has been rumored to be leaving Iowa State for years now, but he's still there. Quarterback Hunter Deckers returns as well. This Iowa State team, they add a wide receiver, Jaden Higgins, who I got to watch up close and in person last year at EKU, tall scudder. But they lost some guys this year, and there's a lot of question marks about what can Iowa State do. Can they recoup? Can they rebuild? They lost some important offensive talent, especially. Their win total is at 6. I know you've kind of always liked Matt Campbell, if I remember correctly. How do you feel about Iowa State?
Yes, I have kind of always liked them, and I think they're a middle of the pack team, but I think they can be over 6 wins. I think they're one of the teams, that could develop and be a little bit more. Again, I like you said earlier, I don't know if there's going to be a surprise team this year like TCU was last year, but I do think Iowa State, again, they're right there with 3 or 4 teams that are going to be tough games with Baylor, Kansas State, how they come out of OSU, how they come out of those games is going to be the deal if they break even or not. But, I've always kind of liked Iowa State, and but I'll go over 6 wins on them.
I'm with you. I go over 6 as well. I don't think they're going to light things up, but I think they're going to be a decent team. I go over 6 wins for Iowa State. Kansas was a surprise team last year. Lance Leipold has come in and done some amazing things. 17 returning starters from their 6 wins last year. Quarterback Jalen Daniels is one of those returners. But last year, their defense allowed 35.5 points per game. You cannot do that and have lasting success. Their win total for this year is set right at what they won last year, 6 games. So will they be better or will they be worse is the question mark right now. How are you looking with Kansas? Are you a believer in the Jayhawks?
No, only because I don't think a team like Kansas surprised a lot of people last year. And this year, they're not going to surprise people as much. 6 wins is probably about where they're at. So I don't know if you say I'm under or over. I would probably go over or under. But 6 win again. I think there's teams that are just right there where they're at, but probably a little bit better. Last year, they played great. They overachieved for sure. But I don't know that they're the kind of team that'll sustain that. At least not this year.
I've got them going under 6 games. I'm not a believer in the Jayhawks, so I got them going on. I think they're going to be right there again. I think they'll be in that 5, 6, 7 game range. I think that some other teams have gotten better. I think the competition has gotten decent. I'm not sure that Kansas, and they're not going to surprise people, of course, this year either. I think that plays a factor. So I'll go under 6 games for Kansas. Let's move on to Kansas State. Chris Kleiman has done a pretty solid job there. Quarterback Will Howard comes in with incredibly high expectations. This Kansas State team has what many consider to be the best offensive line in the conference. The question is did they rebuild on the defense? The defense is going to be they lost key guys, so that's where it's going to be a factor. Can they replace them? They've got the highest win total of any team that we've talked about thus far at 8. Is Kansas State a team to be reckoned with?
I think they are. I think they're one of the teams. If you're going to have somebody challenge the Texas and Oklahomas, I think Kansas State. Again, a few years ago they were kind of surprising people, and they don't now. But I think they have a solid program headed in the right direction. And so even with 8 wins, I'll go over that. I think maybe they can get to 9. That would be a great year for them. But I think Kansas State's somebody that's going to is one of those teams that could really give all these other middle-of-the-pack teams trouble in the conference.
All right, I go over 8 as well with Kansas State. I'm a believer in what they're doing. I think that there is potential for them to win the conference this year as well. I like what's going on there. All right, next up is Oklahoma Boomers Sooner. Coach McGuire, if you're still watching, you might want to plug your ears. All right, Brent Venables is back at coach, 2nd year as the head coach. Last year was the first losing season since 1998 for the Sooners, and luck did not go their way. They were 0-5 in one-score games. Dylan Gabriel is at quarterback. They've got 2 solid running backs. The defense should be better. They've had portal additions. Brent Venables, of course, is a defensive guy. You'd like to think that Oklahoma's defense is going to improve. Last year, sadly, I was right about the Sooners, that they were not going to be what some people thought they would be. So now the question is, what are we going to do? Oklahoma, 9.5. To me, that is an incredibly high number for the Sooners. What are your thoughts?
I think they will be improved. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think Venable will do a good job. And again, Oklahoma is one of those teams that they can recruit. And I think I've heard they've recruited real well. So I think they'll rebound again. I think the issue with them is going to be everybody gunning for them, be the last chance to play OU. But I think OU will be improved. I do think 9.5 is a high number, so I'll go under that. I think 9 wins would be really good for them, 8 or 9 wins. But I think you'll see Oklahoma back on the rise, which they need to be, getting ready for competition in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, that's the deal, right? They have to keep building. I go under 9.5 also. I think they're getting closer. I think they'll get better. But yeah, definitely. I still think I don't feel like the Sooner fan base as a whole loves the Brent Venables hire. And that makes it hard for a coach when you got fan base, at least some of the fan base that are loudly against you. So I think if they start slow, they could get ugly in Oklahoma very quick. So I go under as well. Let's go to Oklahoma State. Hey, by the way, thank you for listening, Coach. We sure appreciate you tuning in and always appreciate your support, our resident Oklahoma fan. Oklahoma State, if anything can make the Sooners feel better, it's probably watching Oklahoma State. Mike Gundy still the head coach there, and they have not had a losing season since 2005. They do have QB questions, though. They got a three-way battle going on. It seems as though the Michigan transfer, Alan Bowman, is leading the way. But again, there might be other people with better information than me. They are implementing a brand new defensive scheme this year, and they're doing it with mostly new players, which may make it easier to do considering it's new players. Their win total is at 6. Dad, they did not have a good season last year. A great season 2 years ago. What do you think about Oklahoma State?
Well, again, I think, there'll be a solid program. They're an interesting one. Coach Gundy's always been very interesting there, and I think he's a good coach. But I wonder, I read a little bit about them, and I think that, they said he needs to adapt to the way college football is going now. And I wonder if at some point it won't be time for a change there. But I think, Oklahoma State should always be a good program where they can recruit there. At 6 wins, I'll go over that. I think maybe they can get to 7. But again, they're going to be the ones right in there with your Baylor's, TCU's, Texas Tech, who's going to win those games. And whether they'll be able to improve or not, I don't know. And having a Michigan quarterback would definitely worry me.
Well, I follow Tennessee. They have a Michigan quarterback. There's a lot of hype about it, so I'll be careful what I say about that. Yeah. But that being said, I'll go over 6 as well, although I think 6 or 7 is probably your number. I think Oklahoma State is in a somewhat of a rebuild kind of situation, and it might take them some time, especially on that defense as well. But I'll go over 6. They've been steady, and you have to count that for something. TCU, they were the darling last year. Sonny Dykes comes in and impresses early with TCU. Quarterback Chandler Morris is considered the breakout candidate in the Big 12. They've got a top 3 defense in the Big 12. This is a team that was good last year, and I think good again this year, Dad. 7.5 is the win total. I think that's low for TCU, actually, so I'm definitely going over for the Horned Frogs. How about you?
I actually looked at their schedule and everything, and I think maybe they'll go under. I think they should get at least 7 wins there. I don't think, again, I don't think they'll have the season they had last year, but we'll see. I've never had a problem with TCU or anything there, but I think they're in the middle of the pack.
All right. One of us will be right. We'll see who it is at the end of the year. That brings us to Texas. Steve Sarkisian still there. Quinn Ewers, the quarterback, and of course he was the big guy everybody was talking about out of high school, going to Ohio State. Then he transfers back to Texas, plays some last year. He's the guy this year as well. Texas returns all 5 of their offensive linemen, and they should be one of the top defenses in the conference as well. If you ask me, I think Texas is ready for the move to the SEC. 9.5 is a big number. I'm going over, Dad. I think Texas is the clear favorite in the Big 12 this year.
I think Texas is the favorite right now. Again, we'll see. I'm interested with their quarterback situation just because of the Arch Manning thing or whatever, but Ewers has looked really, really good. No doubt about that. Their 9.5 is a big number. They've got Alabama. They got to play early. I think 9 wins would be about where they would be because, again, I think people are really going to shoot for them, especially the Texas teams in this conference, and I think they'll get upset at least once.
Maybe. I don't love supporting Texas. But I think this team is right where it needs to be in their final year. I think that Sark is a guy, as much as I'm not a fan of Steve Sarkisian, I think he's the guy with the right temperament for the favorites and keeping them motivated. Of course, he spent some time at Alabama working with Saban, who did a pretty good job with motivating his teams when they were the favorites as well. I feel like Texas is on that the verge of having quite the season this year, and so I'm comfortable with my over there. Texas Tech, though, they're not gonna be an easy out. They're the next team on our list. Head coach Joey McGuire has been impressive. They won their last 4 games of the season. Tyler Chauvin at quarterback. Out of the the offensive line has to improve in order for Texas Tech to compete in the Big 12. They allowed 41 sacks last year. That has to get better. But I think Texas Tech is a program on the rise, and their win total is 7.5. How do you sit with the Red Raiders?
Yeah, I think they'll go over 7.5 and be 8. I think they are a team on the rise. Again, I think they'll be one of the teams moving up in the conference. Again, they're going to be right there with playing some of those middle of the pack schools, but I think maybe they can rise above some of them a little bit. So I'll go over 7.5, 8 or 9 wins. 9 wins would be great for them, but 8 would be a very good season.
See, I don't want to get into my tiers yet, but I think they're above those middle of the pack guys. 7.5 is a number I'm comfortable with going over. I think Texas Tech is a legit team in the Big 12 this year, and they're not the Texas Tech that you think of when you think of Texas Tech, by the way, anymore with Joey McGuire at coach. Newcomer UCF brings in Gus Malzahn, and he's got quarterback John Reese Plumlee. When you got a quarterback with 3 names, you know it's going to be good. John David Booty? Was that his name back in the day? There's been some good ones. John Reese Plumlee, the quarterback. They've got some really good skill players. The offense should be very good. They have some preseason all-conference defenders on this team too. What does that mean? Who knows? I like UCF, and I think that they are going to be the team to watch of the newcomers. 7 is their win total. I'll go ahead and tell you I'm over 7. I think UCF is going to be a pain in the rear end of some of these teams in the Big 12. How do you feel about UCF?
Yes, I think they'll by far be the best team this year of the 4 coming in. And I think the way they've played and the teams they've beaten, I think, they're the team that will have confidence. I believe they'll be able to go into these schools. And, of course, they'll have teams come there to play them. And I'll agree with you. I'll go over 7. I think they could be a dark horse. I wouldn't think they'd win the conference their first year, but I think they'll be somebody that has to be reckoned with, and they'll show very quickly that they belong in a Power 5 conference.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one, I think. I think they're really a team that can, make it intriguing, to say the least. So I'm looking forward to see how they do in the Big 12 and as they come into this new conference. Then we come to West Virginia. If there is a seat hotter than the seat of Neil Brown, I'd like to see it. I feel like this is definitely going to be a very possible early firing situation at West Virginia. They got a quarterback battle. Junior Garrett Green seems to be the leader there. The defense was horrendous. The offense has all kinds of questions. I think Neil Brown is gone by midway through the season. 5.5 wins. I'm going under. I'm all out on West Virginia. How about you?
I'll agree with you on that. Again, their schedule's tough. They don't have any breaks in the schedule. And I think they'll be a team that we talked about the middle of the pack teams. This should be a team that all those can beat. And so I'll go under 5.5. And I agree with you. This could be a coach that doesn't make it through the season in the Big 12. We'll see how it goes. Again, West Virginia, they should be able to rebound. They're a school that has some tradition, but I think they're in a tough spot this year.
They got some drama going on, too, around the basketball program. Not sure if that would bleed into the football at all or not, but I just don't like West Virginia this year. at all. All right, so that brings us to our tiers and to some degree our predictions, I guess, as well. But we'll start with the tiers. We're going to look at the first two tiers, championship contenders, then the conference contenders, and then we'll go to our Vanderbilt tier, and everybody else will just be in that middle section there. So let's start with championship contenders. Do you think there are any championship contenders in the Big 12?
I do not. I don't think there is. Now, if Texas beats Alabama early on, then that could change depending how long they run. But I don't think this year. I think the conference will build up in the future, and when they expand the number of teams in the tournament. But no, I don't think they'll have a championship contender this year.
I disagree, Dad. I think Texas is the team to watch. Now, am I predicting Texas is going to win the national championship? No, I'm not. But I think they're the team that can contend there, not just in the conference, but in the nation. Remember this, Dad. They can lose to Alabama and it really not be that big of a deal. One loss is no issue when it comes to the playoffs, and a loss against a team like Alabama would not be that big of a deal either, especially if they keep it close. But the committee seems to forget those early losses as long as you win the rest of them throughout the season. I think Texas can beat Alabama. I think Texas will beat Alabama. But that being said, I'm going to go ahead and say that Texas is in my tier for championship contenders. I will not I'm not making our year-end predictions just yet. So I'll just leave it at that for now. What about teams you think can contend for the conference this year?
The conference, I think Texas can compete for that. I think Kansas State will be in the running for that. I think Texas Tech could be the dark horse, maybe that could surprise people and make a move. But basically, I think you're looking at Texas and Kansas State, unless OU, is a lot more improved than we think.
So I've got 4 teams as contenders. That's not counting Texas. Texas obviously would be one if they're championship contenders. I'm with you on Kansas State. I think if your school has the name Texas in it this year, I think you have a chance to win the Big 12. Texas Tech and TCU, I think, are contenders. And then I threw Central Florida in there too. UCF as the newcomers. They're a dark horse, no doubt. They're not my pick to win the conference. But I think they can contend. Gus Malzahn, he's been there. He knows what he's doing. And I think he's got the players to do it as well. So I go UCF, Texas Tech, TCU, and Kansas State, all as conference contenders this year. I feel like I'm a little higher up on some of these teams than you are, but that's okay. You're allowed to be wrong every now and then. And that brings us to our final tier, the Vanderbilt tier. Who's the team you look at, or teams maybe? I only have one team. A team you look at and go, there's no hope whatsoever for this team now or in the near future. Yeah, how many do you have in the Vanderbilt tier?
I don't have anybody in there. I know you probably have West Virginia, but to say they don't have any hope in the future, I just don't think that's true. I don't think you have anybody in this conference that now you got some teams that are going to have trouble this year. Houston's going to have trouble this year. There's no doubt about that. West Virginia is going to have trouble this year. But to say there's no hope in the future, I think the way the Big 12 is built, I think there is hope for everybody. And again, it depends who they bring in. If they bring in 2 more teams next year to replace Texas and OU. But as I looked at it, I couldn't put anybody in that tier.
How many years before West Virginia is relevant?
I would think just a couple before they're competitive in the conference.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, West Virginia fans are going to love you. No, I almost put BYU in this category as well. I don't think, this year, definitely not. I think they might be 2, 3, 4 years out, even just from time to build up in the conference. And by then, maybe the conference doesn't even exist. I almost put BYU in here. I probably should have, but I did not. West Virginia's the team. I think they're headed the wrong direction. I don't think they've ever fit in the Big 12. I think that hurts them actually as well. I don't think so. I think you're looking at a decade at least before West Virginia is relevant again. And if you look at Vanderbilt, Dad, they were relevant when Jay Cutler was around, and they still weren't good. So I think West Virginia falls closer to that category than anybody else in the conference. So I put West Virginia in the Vanderbilt tier this year. And I am honestly surprised you didn't have any teams in the Vanderbilt tier for the Big 12. So I was higher on the guys towards the top of the conference. You're higher on the guys in the middle of the conference. But so be it. There you go. That's the Big 12. Let us know if you agree or disagree. You can always email us at thesportstove@gmail.com. You can comment wherever you're listening as well. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're even on Threads, and that's new to us. And so find us there at Sports Stove at each of those places there as well. Dad, I mean, to me, Texas is the clear favorite, and I picked Texas to win the conference. Who do you pick to win the conference?
Yeah, I think at this point of the season, before the season starts, Texas is a clear favorite. I don't think there's any doubt about that to win the conference. I think you're a little higher on Texas, and they're going to end up nationally at the end of the year. But, they are the favorite for the conference.
I mean, if they're one loss and they win the conference, they're in the playoffs. If they're two loss and they win the conference, they probably don't make the playoffs. But I think they're still in the top 12. I mean, I think Texas is there. I think Quinn Ewers is the guy, and I think they're going to be where they need to be heading into the SEC. Now, you put them up against the SEC teams, maybe I wouldn't be quite as high on them as I am now, although I'd still be, I think, high on them, but not quite as high as I am now. But put them against this Big 12, I like their chances, needless to say. I do like Kansas State a lot this year, though. As well. I think they're a legit team to watch out for as well. Okay, and listen, if you want to talk baseball, you need to tune in Sunday night, 8 p.m. And someone's been drinking too much wine. Joe Vernon, West Virginia, Big 12 champs. Go Mountaineers. I don't think it's going to work out that way, Joel, but way to be positive. We do appreciate you listening, by the way, as well. Make sure you follow us on Sports Stove on Twitter and Instagram, and check out the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show live Sunday night at 8 p.m. Tomorrow night, we'll be live doing EKU position previews. We'll have on Maxwell Smith, former Kentucky quarterback, current quarterback coach for EKU. Andy Richmond, the offensive coordinator and running backs coach for EKU, and Joshua Carter. He's the running back at EKU. He's also the brother of Michael Carter from the New York Jets as well. He was on the show last year. Will be on with us tomorrow night, live 8 p.m. on the Sports Stove YouTube channel, and always available afterwards via audio or whatever podcast platform that you listen to. Don't forget to go to righteousfelon.com. Get yourself some jerky. Use that promo code BELLYUP. You're going to get 15% off your purchase, and that lets them know that you were listening to our show as well. Dad, any final thoughts going into the weekend?
No, well, like I said, I'm kind of anxious for baseball to start back up and see where it finishes off there. And after the All-Star break here, glad to see the National League finally won an All-Star game again. That was exciting, but like I said, we're headed into football now with college football, and on the preview here. But again, I'm real anxious for the training camp to start, see where, of course, the Packers are going to go, and everybody's always excited at the start of the NFL season. So we'll see. Yeah, just a lot of sports going on. It wasn't just a week ago we had the hockey draft, and I keep up with the Predators, and so a lot of exciting stuff going on around them and stuff there.
You and I have different definitions of exciting, but that's okay. But there is a lot happening, no doubt. And we'll continue with our college football preview next week. We'll have a new conference that we'll be previewing, as well as any other news going on in the sports world as well. Thank you so much for tuning in to the night's edition of the Sports Stove Podcast. Until next time, we'll see you around the sports